It's a privilege to be filling in for Ron this weekend. And did y'all have a good 4th of July? Good. Speaking of 4th of July, this was my daughter's first 4th of July outfit. It's just low-hanging fruit. You can't not show a photo, right? Well, turn with me to Philippians 2. I'm excited for where we're headed this morning. Philippians chapter 2. If you're sharp, you might have guessed what our topic is today by the giant word behind me. That word is one of the primary things on God's heart for you and I this morning, for his people. So it's no wonder there's some confusion on, what does humility really look like? And on the other hand, the enemy is exalting pride in our society, right? Pride is celebrated. So I wanted to start this morning with just kind of setting the record straight on the biblical, what I believe is the biblical definition of humility. And to start with, I want to point out two examples of false humility, which is pride masking itself as humility. The first one is pretty prevalent. How many have heard of the humble brag? The humble brag. It's, man, I can't believe I took first place in my company's half marathon. I didn't even train for it. Right? It's subtle. It's this Instagram post, look at this thing that I did or that I accomplished, but to God be the glory, Hashtag blessed, right? And we all know what hashtag blessed, usually means. It's usually hashtag look at me, right? But I'm sure if you guys have used hashtag blessed, you didn't mean that, so you get a free pass on it. But it's the humble brag. Okay, the other example of false humility that I just want to point out is maybe a little more subtle. It's not something that's as noticeable on the outside, but it's more internal. And I believe it's just as prevalent. And that's on the other end of the spectrum. It's self-deprecation. Self-deprecation. It's the things that we tell ourselves, probably mostly inwardly, that downplay our role. They downplay our calling, our giftings, our abilities, the responsibilities that God has given us, the influence that he's given us in different spheres, and we kind of downplay that and have this sort of negative approach to things, thinking we're being humble, but it usually stems from maybe it's fear of man, maybe it's some insecurities that we have, and we think we're being humble, but we're actually doing a disservice to God and to ourselves. It's self-deprecation. Example of that would be this painting here. This was painted by Gino Santa Maria, one of our staff members. Gino and his brother Carlos are in our publications department, have been for years. Incredible guys and very talented artists. So Gino painted this beautiful painting a few years back. And as we're taking this in, imagine if Gino, the artist, were to come out and start pointing out things that, because I'm sure his fine-tuned eye sees things that he could have done better. And he starts pointing them out, things that we would never notice, like, the way the colors are blended there in the trees and the way the light reflects off the water. Michelangelo would be very disappointed if he saw this. And we'd be like, Gino, be quiet. Let us take in this beautiful piece of art. Well, it's the same thing for us when we fall into that self-deprecation mode. Because here's the reality, you didn't paint you, God did, right? And so we don't want to rob God of his glory by downplaying ourselves and our role that he's called us to and our abilities. So that's kind of the other end of the spectrum of a false humility that's actually a form of pride. All right, so true humility, here's the thing. True humility strikes a balance in there. It doesn't overinflate our ego, but it also doesn't shortchange who God made us to be and what he's called us to do. So I have a phrase here that I believe is where true humility begins, and it's this. True humility is about maintaining a right view of God, yourself, and others. Maintaining a right view. This is about seeing things from God's perspective. It's about thinking with the mind of Christ. It's about feeling with the heart of the Father. And here's a phrase that I want us to say together this morning. Humble people have heavenly perspective. It's got some alliteration in it to help us remember it, because this is one of the key takeaways as we set up the message today. Humble people have heavenly perspective. Let's just say that together. Humble people have heavenly perspective, right? All right, so I might need your help throughout the message on this. If I say humble people, you're gonna say have heavenly. Yes, so you've got it. You're awake. Awesome. Yeah, that's the truth. Humble people have a heavenly perspective. Because how many know there's an earthly way to see things, there's a natural way to see things, and there's a supernatural way to see things. The gospel is filled with, and I think this is so interesting, seemingly paradoxical realities, okay? Like the last shall be first, the humble shall be exalted, the pure in heart shall see God. You know, this idea of if I guard my heart, if I guard what I set before my eyes and set before my ears, then I'll actually be more satisfied because I'll see the one who perfectly satisfies. Yes, these things that don't seem to coexist at first, but they actually do. Jesus himself, he's the lion and the lamb, right? He's the King of kings and he's the servant of all. I think of the Last Supper, probably arguably the most intense few hours, of Jesus' ministry on the earth. How does the King of Kings carry his heart when he's around the table with his 12 best friends just moments before he's crucified? I think it's very interesting. He doesn't humble brag. He doesn't self-deprecate. No, anchored in his assignment on the earth, knowing all that was about to happen, but knowing who he was, what does he do? He kneels to wash his disciples' feet. He serves them. He loves them. It's so incredible. Think about it. The most intense time in your life when someone in the room is about to betray you, and you have the power to do something about it, but instead you serve them, you love them. That's true humility. And that is greatness in the eyes of God. So Philippians 2, let's look at this together. Philippians 2, this is just the premier passage on humility. There's so much in this that we don't have time to unpack, but I encourage you to take this scripture, meditate on it, get it into your dialogue with God, because this is the way to greatness in God's kingdom. It says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself by taking the form of a servant. Being born in the likeness of men and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name. That's the humility of Jesus, and that is our example. He is our example. But man, these principles, they're so contrary to our human nature, right? They're just like nails on the chalkboard to our flesh. So how can we even begin to walk in these realities in this day and age in our life? Well, by getting to know the Spirit of Jesus who lives in us, the Holy Spirit, right? Just like Ron has been teaching us, the supernatural power that is alive in us. God himself, the scriptures say by the blood of Jesus, our bodies are now temples of the Holy Spirit. And it's only by connecting with the Lord who lives in us that we'll be able to live like he lived on the earth and walk like he walked. It's by setting our mind on the truth of his word, getting these truths in our dialogue with him, staying connected moment by moment, learning to hear his voice and obeying. C.S. Lewis said this that you probably have heard before. He said, humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less, right? Another way of saying that would be humility isn't putting confidence in yourself. Paul says, I put no confidence in my flesh. It's putting confidence in the Holy Spirit. It's putting confidence in the new creation that we are in Christ and who he is in us. Romans 8:6 says, to set the mind on self, on flesh, is death. But to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace. So I wrote out in the notes there one of my favorite prayers, all-time favorite prayers that can just be used in about a million different scenarios, and it's this: God, help me to see what you see, to feel what you feel, and to think what you think about, and you can put any number of things in that blank. About you, God. Help me to see what you see about you. I want to know your heart today. About this troubling relationship, this difficult person that at work that always rubs me the wrong way. This movie I'm watching, this trip I'm going on, myself. God, you call me your beloved. Show me what that means. I want to think the thoughts of heaven. I don't want to waste time thinking my thoughts. I want to think heavenly thoughts, thoughts that matter, that last, that count for eternity. That's the idea here, and that is the bedrock that humility is built upon, is having that right view of God, yourself, and others. So we're going to look at 3 different aspects of humility this morning, and they're all right there in your bulletin. First of all, humility is anchored in heaven, then it's acted out here, and it's all about him. Let's say those together. Humility is anchored in heaven, it's acted out here, and it's all about him, right? So first, it's anchored in heaven. We're living in an upside down world. I kind of referenced that at the beginning. Self-promotion is celebrated, pride is celebrated, and yet people are more desperate for purpose, for meaning than ever before. It reminds me of another C.S. Lewis quote that says, "If I find in myself desires which nothing in this world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world." And that's the same truth with humility. Humility is anchored in another world. It's a heavenly attribute because humble people have, yes, good. Remember, Jesus is our example, the King of Kings and the servant of all. He carried both of those realities in himself effortlessly. And he calls us to imitate him in the way that he lived on the earth. We're royalty. We've been purchased with the blood of the King of Kings. If you've called on the name of Jesus here this morning, then you are royalty. But from that place of royalty, we are called to be a people who, what? Pray for those who persecute us. Bless those who curse us, right? Pour out ourselves for the betterment of others. We use our place of spiritual authority and royalty in Christ to be a blessing to the earth, to be a blessing to other people. Matthew chapter 5, Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount, he touches on this, and he really speaks into the deep truth of humility and what it means for us in actually 2 different verses in the Sermon on the Mount. The first one's verse number 3, where Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." So I just got done saying we're royalty, and now Jesus is saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." So explain that one, Caleb. Well, here it is. Jesus is saying, yes, we're royalty in the new man. When the Holy Spirit takes up residence in us, our eternal spirit is made perfect and right with God. But we have all this junk surrounding it that is our body, our life, our emotions, our broken minds, our fallen nature that still tries to rear its head in our life, right? So Jesus is saying, if you recognize your depravity and your need for me, then the spirit of life that is in you can bloom and can give that supernatural power. So if you recognize, because the truth is we don't recognize it. Most of the time, I don't feel that way. I think, I can do this. Like, yes, okay, help me a little bit here. And then we think we can just add a little Jesus to our life and we're doing okay. And Jesus is saying, no, it's a moment by moment dependence. To really walk in the power of heaven, we have to moment by moment recognize our desperate need for the Lord, that we can do nothing meaningful apart from him. And through that poverty of spirit, Jesus said, you'll be blessed because I'm actually going to give my kingdom to you in the age to come. Same thing, principle in Matthew 5:5. Just a couple verses later, he touches on humility again. He says, blessed are the meek. Meekness and humility are the same idea. For they shall inherit the earth. Now that's not mostly in this age. If you look at the rulers of the earth, Not very many are on fire for Jesus, right? But that's all going to change when Jesus himself returns to this physical earth to reign and rule from Jerusalem. And we'll be reigning and ruling with him. And Jesus said, if you take the low road in this life, then in the age to come, you'll be great, and I'll actually give my kingdom to you. You know, the Bible is full of these humility to greatness examples. I think of King David, you know, the most decorated warrior in Israel. He became the greatest king of Israel. It's from his bloodline that Jesus was born. And yet, how did King David get his beginnings? Out in taking care of smelly sheep out in the field, right? Humble beginnings, and God exalted him. This life is our internship. It's like David in the field with the sheep. How we carry our heart in this life counts for eternity. It matters 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 years because we're eternal beings. And God has placed us on this earth. And the way we spend our time, our resources, our money here, it counts for eternity. This is just our internship. Billy Graham just graduated from his internship. He didn't, finish all that he was called to do. He just graduated from his internship, and now he's with Jesus, and he has roles in heaven, roles in the age to come. That's the same truth of us. The Apostle Paul, when he was writing most of the New Testament, he was in his internship. And so it is for you and I today. It's like this rope. If this rope was our life, and it just goes on and on and on because we're eternal beings, right? And so the rope just goes on and on into eternity. And this red tape here at the end is our 60, 70, 80 years on the earth, right? But how do we live most of the time? We say, okay, if I work really hard here, you know, maybe get an education, which is good, I'm not discounting that. Get an education, then, you know, it'll make the next, 40 years of my life, that much more prosperous. And then right here, I can, kick back and retire and have a good life, have an easy life. And we spend all of our energy and time in this zone right here. And Jesus is saying, well, what about here? What about, down here? I have, exploits we're going to be doing together, things we're going to be doing in the eternal kingdom. And here, and the way he's saying, the way we spend our resources in this little area of our life, it counts. It counts down the road. It counts for eternity. The way we spend our time, our money, our energy. This life is just our internship. So it takes us to our second section. Humility is acted out here. It's acted out in the little piece of red tape section of our life. Because what better place than to be trapped on a blue-green orb in the middle of space with 7.5 billion other self-centered people? What better place to learn humility, right? To exercise humility. The wisdom of God in that is awesome. James 4:6. This is just a powerful passage on humility. You can turn there, you can look at it on the screens. This gives us hope. It gives us excitement about humility and the benefit of humility in this life. It says, but he, that's God, gives more grace. Turn to your neighbor and say, more grace. More grace. I like that word, more. Therefore, it says, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Now, that word grace is not forgiveness. Forgiveness is mercy. And we already know, praise God, we get new mercies every morning. But you might not have known this morning that more power is available for the humble. That's what this word grace is. It's heavenly power. It's divine favor on your life. Deep in your heart, it's peace, it's joy, it's purpose, it's strength, supernatural help from heaven. That's what this word grace means. And God says he's reserving an extra double portion of it for the humble. The posture of our heart is like a magnet. That's what this verse points out. How many know magnets can attract, but they can also repel, right? Depending on the way you have that magnet flipped. And so pride in our heart actually repels the favor of God away from our life. It insulates us from the favor of God. But humility attracts the presence of God to our life. Humility is the magnet that attracts God's grace. I'm talking about grace to trust and to rest in him, to cease from our striving. Grace to love unconditionally, to actually get to know one another and celebrate each other's strengths instead of, feeling like we're in a competition with one another. Grace to be content with what you have, content with who you are. Grace to be confident in your calling in God and to live out your full potential on the earth. Grace to walk in joy and peace in the ups and in the downs. That's the grace that is available to the humble this morning. I think of that song that we used to sing quite a bit called Lowest Place. It said, the bridge of it goes, I gotta get to the wells of joy. I gotta dig for the wells of joy because your river of grace, God, it rushes to the lowest place. Man, that is a true principle, moment by moment, day by day. The river of God's grace rushes to the lowest place. Humility, it actually sets us free from ourselves. Pride is a prison, but humility frees us from ourselves. 2 Corinthians 12:9, I love this passage as well. God tells Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. There's that word again, grace. Power, favor, help. It's sufficient for you because my power is actually made perfect in weakness. And so Paul says, therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Man, I think of dads being willing to boast in their weaknesses, not as an excuse, but as a way of being able to own up when they make a mistake in front of their kids, in front of their spouse, and take the low road and humble themselves. Because, humility, it really has to start in the home. I'm talking about, husbands to wives, wives to husbands, children to parents, parents to children. If we're not exercising humility with those we're closest to, then we miss the point altogether. And it's tricky. It's tricky because I don't see my own pride. Pride is usually not seen by the person that it's in. Doesn't mean it's invisible. Just ask your spouse. It's visible, but just not to you. We miss it. We don't see it in ourselves. It's deep, deep in there. Pride inflates our ego while insulating us from the favor of God, from the help of those around us, and from the God-given potential within us. That's why we need the supernatural help of the Holy Spirit, like I was talking about. Saying, God, shine your light on me, because I don't even know my own heart. Shine your light, show me what you see, so that I can walk in this thing called humility. It's a pursuit, man. It's a race that we're in with this thing, and we have to pursue humility moment by moment, day by day. There's no magic pill and suddenly you're humble. It's just like everything else. You have to work at it, and the best things in life are worth working for. The believer's life is like a slide in a laboratory microscope. You put that slide in there, and at 10 power, it looks pretty good, but you crank it up to 100 power, and suddenly your slide looks a little dirty. So you take it out, and you clean off that slide, put it back in. 100 power looks good, turn it up to 1,000 power, and suddenly it looks dirty again. That's the believer's life who is walking with the Lord, who is saying yes to God in their hearts, moment by moment. That poverty of spirit thing I was talking about, saying, Jesus, I need you. Help me today. Help me to see what you see, think what you think, feel what you feel. It's just like that laboratory microscope slide. Incrementally, step by step, day by day, the Holy Spirit cleanses us a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, so that the power of Christ can shine through our life. So we're going to look at 7 evidences of humility. This is kind of where it gets real practical. And these go by really quick, so fasten your seatbelt. Are you still with me? Yes. Awesome. I'm preaching to myself up here because, man, I need this so much. Okay, evidence number 1, a teachable spirit. Someone with a teachable spirit is eager to learn from others and is easily corrected. Well, I'm already out. Anybody else? A humble person is quick to hear, quick to be taught, slow to speak, and slow to correct or instruct others. It's tough. James 1:19, be quick to listen, but slow to speak and slow to get angry. Pride is quick to respond, quick to instruct others, and usually puts its foot in its mouth. 1 Corinthians 3:18 says, let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you thinks that he's wise in this age, let him become a fool that he may become wise. That's that poverty of spirit principle again. Evidence number 2, sees personal faults. A humble person is quick to take responsibility for their own faults. Pride is blinded to its faults so that when they're addressed, it gets defensive instead of being quick to acknowledge the mistake. Man, I have a personal story with this one. So a few years back, a couple members of my team here at Grace, some of our leaders, came to me, and they had some things that they brought to my attention, blind spot areas in my life that I was hurting them by things that I was saying, things that I was doing. So how do you think I responded when they confronted me on these things? I got defensive. But something amazing happened. As we talked through it, and as I, by God's grace, just took a deep breath and began to actually hear what they were saying instead of just being defensive, then through prayer together, through some tears, through some sussing some things out, I actually, not only was humility taking root in me, but I began to see it in them. Because humility replicates itself. And now some of those people are my best friends in life. And so there's a beautiful opportunity that we have when we exercise humility. It's painful in the moment, but it pays dividends in the long run. And I still have a lot to learn about that. Evidence number 3, a grateful spirit. Humility shows us that we're actually getting a better deal than we deserve in the grand scheme of things. Whereas a prideful person, they're quick to feel entitled. They're quick to feel mistreated and slighted. But a humble person is a grateful person. Pride, really is quick to develop a spirit of bitterness. That's really what entitlement leads to, is a spirit of bitterness. But an unoffended heart is very precious to God. He'll remember it forever. He'll reward it. Evidence number 4, humility has a deep awareness of others. A deep awareness of others. Each of us have a story, stories of victory, stories of defeat, stories of heartache and tears, stories of celebration and joy. And humility allows us to be able to see other people's stories and celebrate them. But pride is so caught up with negative emotions. And what I mean by that is, okay, if I say this thing here, then I'll probably get a little step ahead in this way, or if I put myself in this light, that'll look better for this person, and maybe I can try to get ahead here and put a guard up here. And we're always distracted by trying to get ourselves to look in a better light, saying a sarcastic comment here, and just being the funny guy, and some of that's okay, but some of it is just pride, and it actually takes away the joy of seeing other people's stories and celebrating, each other's victories. The Bible says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Pride steals that from us, but humility allows us to engage in the stories of other people that are all around us. We're better together. Evidence number 5, patience. Humility is kind and patient with the faults of others. This is another one that I need to work on. It's not easily insulted or offended by other people's mistakes. It has patience with one another. The measure of our anger speaks to the measure of our unperceived pride. Evidence number 6, humility does good in secret because it seeks the approval of God rather than people. Matthew 6:3, when you give to the needy, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. We naturally want to draw attention to ourselves when we do something for someone else. And God says, well, you'll have your reward with those 2 or 3 people, but I'm going to reward the things that no one else sees. because I'm the God who rewards in secret. And one day it'll be proclaimed from the rooftops. But in this life, it's the secret things that I will reward. Last one, evidence number 7, seeks the benefit of others. Someone who's humble uses their position of influence to benefit those around them, to actually help others succeed, to help others get ahead. You know, all of these really are encapsulated in that Philippians 2 passage that we started with today. So again, I can't say it enough to take that passage and, man, just meditate on it. It's one of those difficult passages because, again, it's like nails on a chalkboard to our flesh. It goes against the very core of our sinful nature. You know, we're all for others, right? It's like, you know, I love all people. You know, God said that we're supposed to love people. I love people. I'm about others. I like others. Until others has a name and a face, right? And an annoying tone to their voice. And a sandpaper personality. Then it's like, I don't have to exercise humility with that person, right? I just want to do it with my best friend that I get along with, you know? No, those are the people that we're called to exercise humility with the most. It's like, but God, they're less qualified than I am. They don't know you, you know, they're less knowledgeable. They're less deserving, God. And God would say to us today, well, that's how I found you. When you were less qualified, when you were less deserving. In fact, you were my enemy, and I sent my son to die for you, right? Now go and do likewise. Aren't you glad you came to church this morning? This is not lightweight Christianity here this morning, but it's so important. Last section, it's all about him. It's all about Jesus. It's all about this humble king, the King of Kings and the servant of all, who calls us his own and invites us to greatness in his kingdom by living like he lived in this life. Think about it. In every conflict you will ever face, meekness will always have the ultimate victory. Humility will always win. Maybe not in this life, but in the age to come it will, because our King is meek, our King is humble, and he is our example. Look at the end of Philippians 2 again. He humbled himself as Jesus by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name. Hebrews 12:2, Jesus, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. And we see a theme. Humility is the doorway to exaltation. Matthew 20:16, so the last will be first, and the first last. 1 Peter 5:6, humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you. James 4:10, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. It's gonna be worth it. It's gonna be worth it. It's gonna be worth it when we hear those words that we long to hear. Matthew 25:21, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. I want to have John and the team come out and just begin to play. We're going to close with this invitation this morning, Matthew 11. There's only one place that Jesus describes himself in this detail in all of the Bible. And it's right here in Matthew 11. First he says, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. I think about that. All who labor and are heavy laden with pride. Pride is a burden. Pride is a prison. He says, come to me and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And here's the King of Kings description of himself. For I am gentle and what? Lowly in heart. And you will find rest for your souls. This is the yoke of humility, and it's worth describing here for a second. So the yoke is that double-arched truss that used to set over the shoulders of oxen, right? It's a double-arched wooden truss. And what Jesus is saying here is in the olden days, the way they would train up a young ox would be to yoke him in with a mature ox. So the mature ox not only would have to pull 90% of the load, but he would also have to keep the young ox from trying to stray off the path, and he would teach him how to stay on the path. So what Jesus is saying to us this morning is there's an opening in the yoke of humility next to me. Would you come and join me? Because humility is so important. This is so important to me, Jesus said. That I want you to get humility because I want you to be great in the age to come. So I'll actually be the one that does the heavy lifting while you learn humility from me. Come and get in the yoke with me. That's the invitation this morning. Let's stand together. We're going to have the prayer team come on down, and this is such an amazing opportunity that we have every week to come and to get prayer for anything that you need. If you need just a fresh touch from the Lord, maybe a booster shot in the arm of some of the things we were talking about today, and say, God, help me. Come and get prayer this morning. If you have sickness in your body, any need at all, a family member that you want to pray for. But before we do that, I just want all of us to pray this prayer together. It's going to be on the screens. This is taken from our humility prayer in the fellowship prayers, and I've added a little bit to it at the end as well. Let's pray this together. It says, Jesus, teach me how to walk in your yoke of humility and lowliness of mind. I set myself to learn lowliness of heart from you so that it transforms my attitudes, speech, and actions. Please let me think more like you think, see more of what you see, and feel more of what you feel so that I can walk in the humility you have called me to. In Jesus' name, amen.